Hi, I'm your host, Dr. Lori, and welcome to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. This podcast fosters curiosity and understanding about neurodiversity while empowering individuals with tools for acceptance and inclusion in classrooms, the workplace, and communities. Featuring shared stories of neurodiverse life experiences, it sheds light on navigating a world not designed for diversity. Universally Unique starts now. Hi, this is Dr. Noto. Welcome to our podcast today. My guest for Universally Unique today is Kara Satalino, and she is going to share with us the journey that she and her family have been on around her youngest child, her daughter's diagnosis of cystic fibrosis. But before we get started, we're going to take 3 box breaths to get us all settled in. I will count us through those. So we're going to start with 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale, hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. And we'll keep going back and forth with that. So breathe in. 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathe out. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. And a nice sigh to let it all out. So, Kara, thank you for joining me this evening. And what I like to do to get started is to just have you kind of share your journey. I know there've been lots of twists and turns and lots of layers to the things that have gone on, and I know that your journey really starts about a day after Cece was born. So if you want to give us because she's 12 now?
She's almost 11.
Okay. Almost 12. That scares me now too. So a lot has happened over those 12 years, but why don't you give us kind of the overview of how things came to pass and where you are now?
Yeah. So my husband and I have 4 kiddos, and about 12 days after our youngest, Cecilia, was born, we got a call from the doctor's office. My husband took it. I believe I was out running errands with her. And the doctor's office had said, we'd really like for you to come in. We have to talk to you. And he said, okay, well, they said, come in at 5. He said, okay, I'll tell my wife, and hung up. And then he relayed the message, and I thought it was kind of funny. I think it was like a Wednesday or a Thursday, and she had a doctor's appointment the following Monday. So I was like, well, why do they want us to come in? And it wasn't even at our doctor's office. It was a town over, someone covering for our doctor. So I just thought the whole thing was odd, and the fact that they wanted us to come in at 5, but the office closes at 4:30. So I called them back and I said, can you tell me what this is for? And they said, I can't. The doctor will when you get here. And I said, well, we're coming now then. We're not going to wait till 5. And so I knew something wasn't right for them to be having us come into a different office in a different town for an unplanned appointment. So unfortunately, my gut was right, and we were told that her heel prick test that all babies in Connecticut get before they leave the hospital when they're born came back with a high chance of her being testing positive for a CF mutation, a cystic fibrosis mutation. And so they recommended that in order to, really like rule it out, we needed to take her for a sweat test. And so the only thing at that point that I knew of cystic fibrosis was that it was a childhood disease and that children died very, very young. And so I was devastated. And they said, don't go home and Google it. Just wait until you get the results. And so
You went
I
home and
went
Googled
right
it.
home and Googled it. And I remember them saying, like on Google, it said like children with CF will typically like have extra, there's extra salt on their skin. They excrete extra salt and they might taste salty. So I like licked her all night, which I know now is like the worst thing. Like you don't ever want to put your germs on someone living with CF. And I just like licked her all night. And I convinced myself that she did not have CF because she did not taste salty. And unfortunately, I was wrong, and her sweat test came back very high, which indicated that she did, in fact, have two mutations for cystic fibrosis. So my husband and I did not know we were carriers. And over the next couple of weeks, we learned a lot about what cystic fibrosis was. I can say that the the Central Connecticut Pediatric Cystic Fibrosis Clinic at CCMC was amazing, and they brought us in for a family meeting, and they told us all about what CF was and the history, and medications she could take and treatments, and the fact that it's come so far in the short time since discovering the gene that plan on sending her to college. She's gonna do amazing things. So that didn't really make me feel better because I just received this awful diagnosis for my little girl. But we learned quite a lot, and it was very overwhelming. But they were wonderful and so supportive. So that's kind of like the gist of the beginning of my story.
Yeah. So, and neither you nor your husband realized that you carried the gene, and then when those two things got together, old biology info, you stick two receptive genes together and you get a mutation. You also figured out that some of your sons carry one of those genes as well.
Yeah, so we were lucky enough to have the boys. So I have three older boys. And we were lucky enough to find out that my oldest, Gabriel, has my mutation, and Samuel has George's mutation. And Luke doesn't have either of our mutations. So we were told our family, our children are like a Punnett square in a biology book. So
Mhm.
equal 25% of everybody, carrying the genes, except for Luke. He doesn't carry any of them, thank goodness. But so actually, the boys who tested positive for the mutations, there are carriers. They actually started seeing the CF pulmonologist as well, not because they had CF, but because they did have pretty severe asthma.
Mhm.
And so she took them on to her caseload, and she was like that doctor, Dr. Collins. She's amazing, and she solves puzzles like no other, which I'm sure in my story will come out shortly.
Yes. Yeah.
But she was so wonderfully supportive right away. She kind of just took us under her wing, and she got to know the family and the family history. And she, along with an allergist at Connecticut Asthma and Allergy, worked very cohesively to come up with a treatment plan for my boys. So we were very lucky about that. Um, but it was really stressful that first couple of years that Cece was alive. Um, bless you.
Excuse me.
You okay? Oh, keep going. Sorry. Um, so she was sick a lot, and we kind of attributed it to the fact that the boys were in school and they were bringing home lots of germs and whatnot. And so, unfortunately, because she was sick, she had to sit through breathing treatments through the nebulizer, where we would put a little mask on her face and she would have to breathe in albuterol. Um, and medications that would help to open up her lungs. Um, and we had to do chest therapy. So we had to clap on her chest to break up the mucus that gets stuck because of the cystic fibrosis. And I don't think I mentioned that cystic fibrosis is really characterized by a thick, sticky mucus that clogs up your digestive and respiratory, pretty much all of the organs that make mucus, but specifically your digestive and respiratory organs. So frequent infections occur that are very hard to clear, which is why we took caution with her. And, when she's sick, we would, let me backtrack for a second. Every single day, once she started her treatments, she would do a nebulizer treatment as soon as she woke up with 20 to 30 minutes of chest therapy, where we would clap on each of the lobes of her lungs to help break up the mucus for her to cough out. And so she did that when she woke up and right before she went to bed. And that typically takes 45 minutes to an hour. And when she was sick, we would be doing that every 4 hours. So it was a very frequent occurrence in the first couple of years of her life because she was sick so often. And you can imagine a little baby who's having to go through a sick plan where she's sitting on our laps for 45 to 60 minutes every 4 hours. So there's between naps and feeding, there's not a lot of downtime where she's able to explore and learn to crawl. And so it was kind of hard developmentally for her because she wasn't able to do the same things the boys were at those ages. But she was the happiest baby despite being sick so often and having to do treatment. She just was so full of joy, and she would laugh and smile with her little gummy smile, and such a joy.
Well, and having the mask on so frequently, her speech was delayed as well.
Her speech was delayed. Yep. And she actually ended up being diagnosed with dysphagia, which is a swallowing disorder. So I believe at 2 or 3 months, we started seeing a speech therapist. We had to switch her pacifiers and her bottles. We had to learn different ways to feed her so that she wouldn't choke on the milk. She'd had swallow studies, and at one point they ended up making her NPO because she was choking so frequently. And I still really to this day don't know what that was caused by. But
which meant that when she couldn't eat orally, she ended up with a tube feed into her stomach.
yeah, she when she was a year old, she was she had been diagnosed as failure to thrive pretty early on, and we tried very, very hard to get her to gain weight. But one of the characteristics of CF is because you're working so hard to breathe, your body is working so much harder, you're burning so many more calories. So it's very difficult to gain weight. And so that was a very classic symptom, and it was one that we saw right away with her. And so by the time she was a year old, it was an emergent procedure that needed to be done. We needed to put a feeding tube in, and it ended up being one of the best things for her and for us because it really truly saved her life. She started gaining weight right away, and we're very lucky that the doctor really kind of was able to talk us into it.
Well,
because we were apprehensive about it at first.
It took the pressure off of you trying to get her to eat as much as you thought she needed to eat, because then the tube feeding was taking care of the calorie part. So she could, when she was able to eat again, it was eating for pleasure basically and not for calories.
It wasn't a battle. And because we were working so hard to add calories into her when she was younger, we would have to add butter and olive oil to her milk, and we needed to add salt, and I'm sure it didn't taste good, which is why she didn't want to eat it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a fight. So it truly was her exploring foods when it was time, like when she was able to eat and drink again, once the dysphagia was kind of fixed, I guess, because she was cleared of that. I would say around maybe 3 or 4. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Well, and she became a really good advocate for herself. I recall you sharing a story where she started explaining to the other kids in her preschool class that she had a tube. What did she called it? Tubie, I think is
Yeah,
what she called
we
it.
used to call it her Tubi. She I always said to the I was upfront with her teachers right away. I don't my husband and I don't hide her diagnosis because we always want her to feel included. So we try really hard to educate our community about CF and how it's not contagious and how we have to be very careful to keep her healthy. And when the boys were younger and they would be playing sports, my husband and I would try to time her feed tubing around the sports so we could publicly feed tube her and have people ask questions and just kind of get used to it so that she was never ashamed. People in the community were just kind of used to, oh, she's going to have some tubing now.
Yeah,
And I'm so grateful that we did that because the kids really didn't bat an eye. Like it was just Gabe's sister or Luke's
yeah,
sister. It
yeah,
didn't matter that she had an extra belly button. When she was in pre-K, I had said to her teacher, I feel like we're going to have to really kind of work together to solve some things because I've never gone through school with a child with a rare disease before. She'd never been in daycare. Our priority for her was really just socialization and keeping her healthy.
yeah,
And because she had the dysphagia, she was speech delayed. And so we were very lucky. All the kids were so wonderful and the teachers were so wonderful and they really worked together. And Cece came home one night and she was really upset. And she said, "Can you come in and tell everyone about my Tubi?" And I said, "Well, mommy has to work, but what if you tell them about your Tubi?" And she didn't have the words. Like she really didn't understand what to say or why to say it. She knew she needed it, but she didn't know how to explain it. And so I said, "Well, what if we ask Miss Welch if she can talk about it? And, mommy will tell her what to say." I said, "And you can bring your dolly in and you can show them how you do your tube feeding with your dolly." And I had emailed the teacher that night and just said, she's really upset because I guess someone had said to her very innocently at 3, "Why do you have another belly button?" I mean, they were little
yeah,
babies.
yeah.
And so she really didn't know what to say. And so her teacher and I went back and forth with, a couple of different plans. And unbeknownst to me, she had put the doll in her backpack to go to school the next day. And at morning meeting, she took it out and she kind of stood next to her teacher and she said, "Can I show my friends my dolly and the Tubi?" And so she showed everybody how a baby with a tubie gets fed, and that was it. Like that was it. But she's been we've had that a couple of times where she just didn't have the words. She wanted to advocate for herself, but she didn't have the words. So she would come home and it would kind of build up before she would come to me.
Hmm.
And then we would talk about it, and then she would handle it the next day in school.
Yeah,
So I've always been very communicative with the schools though, because I
yeah,
want them to understand, what she's thinking and feeling, because she's not one to complain. She's not one to tattle.
yeah,
She is one to kind of stand up for herself, but she just needs to know how to do it and say it.
yeah,
So, yeah,
yeah. Well, and I think, as she's gotten older, she's got more vocabulary for all this.
yeah,
She she unfortunately spends quite a bit of time around medical professionals, so I suspect she has a medical vocabulary that the average 11-year-old does not have.
right.
And I know that you and your two older sons have been advocating on her behalf in Washington, and she sees that. So I suspect that that's really helpful for her to see. Although I know being in those large crowds was is not a good idea for her. Um,
Yeah, she
but
actually came with me to see one of our congressmen over the summer,
ah,
and he's been wonderful in supporting us. And I wanted him to meet her, and so she was like, "Okay, we'll go." And so we brought one of the medications that she was in a medical trial for, and we we decided to have a snack with him and show him how he takes it. And we explained the history behind it and why she was in the trial and why she needs to take it. And it was really a very meaningful meeting for all of us. And I think she felt really proud that she was able to be a part of that. So,
Yeah, well, and I'm sure that the sort of show and tell that the two of you did for him made all of that so much more real for him because you can say my child needs this medication that's not on the market yet, and if our insurance gets screwed up, then she's not going to be able to get it, and these are the consequences. It becomes more real when they see a real person, even though you're advocating on her behalf and you're probably showing them pictures and all that kind of stuff. But the fact that she was right there with them.
yeah,
Now,
yeah.
if I understand correctly, she has a slightly unusual mutation of CF. Hers is like a lesser frequency one.
So she has the two mutations she has, the one that I passed down to her is the most common, Delta 508. And the one that my husband passed down to her is very rare. And I believe I could be wrong, but I believe that only 4% of the population have that mutation. But because of that mutation, she was able to start taking a modulator to help correct the mutation, which is
And
what
she
she's
took
on
that very
now.
early on.
Very, or she was in the medical trial for it. Yeah, we were very lucky because she was able to start it a little earlier because she was in the trial. Yeah.
So, I mean, she's thriving at this point. I mean, she's involved in all kinds of sports activities. She's doing well in school, which is not really a giant surprise, given the fact that you're a teacher. But sometimes the children of teachers don't particularly like it when the parent tries to re-explain what maybe they didn't understand at school. But she seems to be doing quite well. But there are still things that are an issue and that need to be you need to keep on top of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, she's a typical 10-year-old little girl. She doesn't want to do the treatments that she has to do every single day. And, it takes an hour away in the morning and afternoon or evening from what she would rather be doing, which is, listening to music or doing, not that she wants to do homework, but doing her homework in her room, in a more comfortable area, talking to her friends if she wants to stay out a little later, doing something with her friends. She has to really kind of plan out when she's doing her treatments and she knows she has to stay up later.
Mhm.
So that's kind of like a little crook in her side. Um, but she's really, really good and she's really, really smart and amazing. And she may not like doing all of that extra CF stuff, but she does it because she knows she has to.
Yeah.
So,
And a lot more of her symptomology is like gastrointestinal, and hers is the lungs are not her primary problem. They are still a problem, but they're not her biggest issue.
right. Everybody who lives with CF has like a different presentation, if I will. And she's always had more of the gastro presentation where she'll typically get like a bowel obstruction. She's been
Mm.
hospitalized for bowel obstructions multiple times. She does take pancreatic enzymes before she eats anything with fat. But you know, every once in a while she will still get backed up. We're very lucky, since she's consistently been on the modulator, she has not really had a bowel obstruction in about 5 years. So
Wow, that's
um,
wonderful.
we are very, very lucky in that regard.
So I think in this current, I don't know, political climate, I think there's been a lot of talk about cutting insurance, getting rid of the Affordable Care Act, and I think that's been a lifeline for your family.
Yeah.
And, I'm not trying to make a political statement, but without that, that's a big problem. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why you were recently in Washington advocating on behalf of individuals with cystic fibrosis. Am I
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah. Absolutely. We really need to make sure that the individuals with rare diseases and, you know, everybody who needs insurance gets their insurance and they don't have to pay an arm and a leg for it.
Yeah.
Everybody deserves to have that health care.
Yeah. Well, in the long term results of that are that if she gets the things she needs in advance of creating problems,
Yes.
then, it's- I mean, not to make her sound like dollars and cents, but on the other side, she's less expensive because she's not in the hospital with a bowel obstruction. She's not
100%.
having certain problems because it's getting dealt with on a day-to-day basis with preventative
Right.
treatment.
And we want to keep her as healthy as possible so that, other things don't come up, right?
Yeah.
Like if she's sick all the time, and we're not, and she has to end up on steroids all the time, there's other things that happen. Like
Yeah.
she has a history of adrenal insufficiency, which is a
Yeah.
very dangerous, life-threatening condition. And
Yeah.
if she's not taken care of and she ends up on steroids repeatedly, that could happen again.
Yeah.
So we really need to just keep her as healthy as
Yeah.
possible.
And I think, that's one of the things that I think folks need to recognize, it's like we're here in this moment and this is dollars and cents it's costing and I want it to be cheaper and I don't want to pay for this and I don't want to pay for that. But ultimately, as taxpayers, we will pay the price for these things in the future if we don't do as much preventative as possible.
Right.
So what are her goals for the future? Or what are your goals for her for the future? I know you said college, absolutely, without hesitation, but
Well, you know what?
what do you hope
I,
for her?
I I just really hope that she's happy. I know that she'll do what she wants to do and what she has a passion for. So I just hope that she's able to figure that out and roll with it
Yeah.
because she's a strong, independent little girl. And I know she's going to be a strong, independent little woman too.
Yeah. Well, and I think, with three older brothers, she's had to figure out how to hold her own. So that's definitely been to her advantage. Does she have a particular area of interest besides sports that you might see her gravitating towards?
I don't know. I don't know that she knows yet. Like her focus right now is just being with her friends and her sports.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I wasn't sure if, she's like math is like super, that's her thing,
she
or
does,
she
she really
likes to
likes
read
writing
or
a lot. She doesn't like to read, which breaks my heart, but she does like writing. So,
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah.
maybe that could be a piece that gets added into your advocacy. Maybe
Yeah.
she starts writing some things that you start adding in as you start figuring out how you're going to continue doing your advocacy. Especially now that
Yeah.
those kids are getting bigger, they don't need you nearly as much. You could start a blog or something.
They'll
Um,
always need their mama.
oh, of course they will, but in a variety of different ways. So, Kara, as 30 minutes goes by, like, and it feels like in a second. But I very much appreciate you taking the time to visit with us. And I do hope that our listeners are getting at least a little bit of an idea of what it's like to be in a family who has a child with a chronic illness, what some of the challenges are, and what some of the joys and the great accomplishments that you folks have had. I suspect when they were putting that tube in her stomach, you couldn't have possibly imagined where she is right now.
I know. And we were so excited last year it was able to come out. So she's been tube free for about a year and a half now.
But was she using it or was it just there for
No, she
precaution?
wasn't. It was more like a comfort thing for her.
Ah, okay.
So,
Yeah. Well, it went when it was ready to go. So
yeah,
that's good. And she makes a lot of decisions for herself, which,
she does. She
as
does.
many medical decisions as are appropriate for a 10-year-old to make.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, which, I think you and your family set a good example for other families who are living with children with rare chronic illnesses.
We
So,
try. We're just, we're taking one step at a time, one day at a time, and just doing what we think is best in the moment.
yeah. Well, and clearly from the fact that she's thriving and the other three are as well, I think you're doing just fine.
Thank
So,
you.
thank you very much for spending this time with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to Universally Unique, exploring the neurodiverse world of the extraordinary. Join me, Dr. Lori, on Transformation Talk Radio every second and fourth Monday at 11:30 Pacific Time as we continue to explore navigating a world not designed for diversity. For advocacy and support for individuals with disabilities, let's connect. Learn more about consulting and life coaching at notoholisticconsulting.com.